The sound of my own daughter's voice, sharp and trembling with rage, still echoes in my ears. "Get out," she shrieked, phone in her hand. "Get out of my house right now, or I swear I will call the police." I just looked at her, the little girl I taught how to ride a bike. And I didn't argue. I just smiled, turned around, and began the process of taking that very house away from her. If you believe that family should be built on respect, not exploitation, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss how this unfolds. The sound of my own daughter's voice, sharp and trembling with rage, still echoes in my ears. "Get out," she shrieked, her smartphone held up like a weapon. "Get out of my house right now, or I swear I will call the police." I just looked at her, at Lindsay, the little girl I'd taught how to ride a bike, the young woman whose college dorm I'd painted myself. Her face was blotchy with tears, but her eyes were hard, reflecting the polished gleam of the hardwood floors I'd installed for her as a wedding gift. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. A strange calm washed over me, the kind you get after the worst part of a storm has already hit. I just smiled, a thin, tired smile that didn't reach my eyes, turned my back on her and her trembling husband, and walked out the front door. The lock clicked shut behind me, a sound of finality. As I walked to my truck, I wasn't thinking about arguing. I was thinking about a phone number for a real estate lawyer. It's funny how your life's work can be summed up in the things you build. For 35 years, I was a general contractor. My days started before the sun came up and ended long after it went down. I lived by the smell of sawdust and fresh paint, the rough feel of concrete under my palms. My hands are a roadmap of that life, a geography of calluses, old scars, and knuckles that ache when it rains. I missed school plays and family dinners. I worked weekends and holidays, all with one goal in mind, to build a foundation so solid that my daughter, Lindsay, would never have to know the kind of struggle I did. I remember when she and her new husband, Austin, found this house. It was a good structure, solid bones, in a decent neighborhood with good schools. It was more than they could afford. Of course, Austin had a sales job with a flashy title, but an income that went up and down like a yo-yo. So, I stepped in. I didn't just co-sign the loan. I put down the entire 20% deposit, a sum that represented nearly a decade of my savings. I can still picture the lawyer's office, the air thick with the smell of old paper and leather. The mortgage broker slid a mountain of documents across the polished mahogany table. My own lawyer, a practical man named Frank, tapped a specific page. "Now, Eric," he'd said, his voice low, "the bank is suggesting you sign as a guarantor. I advise against that. We'll structure this so you're a co-owner. Joint tenancy. It protects your investment. It's just a formality." Of course. But it's the smart play. A formality. I remember nodding, signing where he told me to. Lindsay was beaming. Austin was clapping me on the back, calling me the best father-in-law in the world. I took my copy of the paperwork home, filed it away in a heavy, fireproof metal box under my bed, and didn't think about it again for 7 years. I was just a father helping his daughter. That's all I thought it was. The beginning of the end started with a phone call 3 weeks ago. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my small apartment, enjoying a cup of coffee and the quiet of retirement, when my old landline rang. I almost never use it, so the sound made me jump. "Hello?" A clipped, professional voice on the other end asked if this was Eric Miller. I said it was. "Sir," the voice continued, "I'm calling from the Risk Assessment Department of Westgate Financial regarding the property at 114 Willow Creek Drive, IV. We're showing several missed payments on the primary mortgage and a significant draw on the home equity line of credit." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "I think you have the wrong number. That's my daughter's house. Our records show you as a co-owner, Tussir. The total outstanding debt, including the HELOC and late fees, is $53,412. The number just hung there in the air. $53,000. It was a figure so large, so specific. It couldn't be a mistake. I thanked the man for the information, my voice sounding distant and hollow to my own ears, and hung up the phone. The silence in my apartment was suddenly deafening. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in front of my old desktop computer, the one Lindsay had called a dinosaur, and taught myself how to navigate the county's public records website. It was clunky and slow, but I was patient, and there it was, in black and white. Not just the original mortgage, but a second one, a home equity line of credit taken out 18 months ago, and then another loan against Austin's 401 Kelvin. Each document was a digital breadcrumb leading me deeper into a forest of deceit. They were drowning in debt, and they had used the house, my foundation, as their personal ATM. The next day, I drove over. I found Austin in the garage, polishing his ridiculously oversized pickup truck. He was humming along to some pop song on the radio. He smiled when he saw me. Wide salesman's smile. "Eric, hey. Man. What's up?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I held out the papers I had printed from the county website. "Austin, I got a call from the bank yesterday. Can you explain this to me?" His smile vanished. He wiped his hands on a rag, his eyes darting from the papers to my face and back again. I saw a flicker of panic, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. I don't know what you're talking about. Eric," he stammered, his voice suddenly an octave higher. "This has to be some kind of mistake. A clerical error. Lindsay and I are doing great." He was a terrible liar. I'd worked with men on construction sites my whole life. I know the look of a man trying to talk his way out of a screw-up. Just then, the door from the kitchen opened and Lindsay walked in, carrying a basket of laundry. "Dad, what a nice surprise." Her face lit up, and for a second, my resolve wavered. But Austin saw his opportunity. He immediately put on a wounded expression. "Honey, your dad is here. He's making some crazy accusations. He thinks we're in some kind of financial trouble." Lindsay's smile faded. She looked from Austin's panicked face to my grim one. I tried to speak, to explain calmly. "Lindsay, honey, the bank called me. I just want to understand what's going on. I'm here to help." I held the papers out to her. She didn't take them. She didn't even look at them. Her eyes filled with tears. But they were tears of anger, not sadness. "Help?" she snapped, her voice rising. "By coming here and accusing my husband of what? You're just trying to break us up. You've never liked him." It was a low blow. And it wasn't true. I didn't dislike Austin. I just saw him for what he was, a man who valued appearances over substance. But hearing that from my own daughter felt like a physical blow. I tried again, my voice pleading. "Lindsay, please, just look at the documents. The numbers are right there. I'm worried about you losing the house." That's when she did it. She put her hands over her ears like a small child, refusing to hear something she didn't like. "I'm not listening to this. You're a liar. You're trying to ruin my marriage." I stood there, stunned into silence. This was the child I had rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I had bandaged. Now she stood before me, defending the man who had gambled away her security, and calling me the enemy. "Lindsay, honey, I'm just trying to help you," I said, taking a step toward her. She flinched back, pulling her phone from her back pocket. Her hand was shaking, but her voice was cold as ice. "I mean it. Get out," she said, her thumb hovering over the call button. "Get out, or I will call the police on my own father." I returned to my small, keyed apartment. The anger and the hurt were a bitter pill in my throat, but as the hours passed, the pain began to cool, hardening into something else, something cold, clear, and solid as steel. I walked into my bedroom, knelt down, and pulled the old, heavy metal box out from under my bed. The hinges groaned as I opened it. I sifted through old tax returns and car titles until my fingers found the thick manila envelope from the house closing. I pulled out the deed, the paper crisp and heavy in my hands. My eyes scanned past the legal jargon until they landed on the line Frank, my old lawyer, had insisted on. It didn't say guarantor. It didn't say benefactor. It said, clear as day, Eric Miller and Lindsay Miller, as joint tenants with right of survivorship. I sat there on the floor, the document in my hands, and I finally understood. They thought it was their house to loot. They were wrong. It was ours, and if they wouldn't let me save it, then I would have to be the one to take it back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table until the first gray light of dawn crept through the blinds, the deed lying in front of me like a sacred text. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was no longer a paralyzing fog. It had solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I made a pot of coffee, black and strong, the kind I used to drink on job sites at 5 in the morning. Then I sat down at my old computer, fired it up, and typed real estate lawyer near me into the search bar. The next morning, I found myself sitting in an office that was the complete opposite of my world. There was no dust, no smell of cut lumber, just the quiet hum of an air conditioner and the scent of lemon polish. The man across the desk, Mr. Davies, was younger than me, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put me at ease. He listened without interruption as I laid out the whole story, my voice low and even. I pushed the deed, the bank notices, and the printouts from the county website across his desk. He picked up the deed first, his eyes scanning it quickly. He read it, then read it again, a slow nod forming. He looked at the other documents, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, the only sound was the rustle of paper. Finally, he stacked the papers neatly, folded his hands on top of them, and looked me straight in the eye. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice firm and clear, "your old lawyer, Frank, was a very smart man. This deed is ironclad." He tapped the document with his index finger. "You are a full, legal co-owner. They can't sell. They can't refinance. They can't even take out a major loan against this property without your signature. You don't just have a say. Eric, you hold all the cards. We can file what's called a partition action. It's a lawsuit that asks the court to order the sale of a property when the co-owners can't agree. And in this case, they have no grounds to fight it. A wave of relief. So profound, it almost made me dizzy. Washed over me. It wasn't just in my head. I wasn't crazy. I was right. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Austin. His voice was different this time. The fake charm was gone, replaced by a low, menacing tone. "You know, Eric," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "It'd be a real shame if something happened to an old man living all alone. Accidents happen. You know things fall on people at construction sites all the time." I held the phone to my ear and listened. I dealt with subcontractors who tried to intimidate me, with union guys who thought they could push me around. Austin was an amateur. He was a spoiled child trying on a tough guy costume, and it didn't fit. When he was finished with his little speech, I said nothing. I just hung up the phone. But his threat did something. It chipped away at the last piece of hesitation I had. That evening, I sat in my armchair, watching the city lights blink on outside my window. I thought about Lindsay as a little girl, her hand tucked in mine. I thought about the pride in her eyes on her graduation day. A father's instinct is to protect, to shield his child from harm and from their own mistakes. But I realized that what I was about to do wasn't an act of destruction. It was the hardest form of protection there is. Shielding her from the consequences of her choices, of their choices, wasn't helping her. It was crippling her. It was teaching her that actions don't matter, that loyalty is a one-way street, and that my life's work was hers to burn. The lesson was going to be painful, but it was one she had to learn. The next day, the calls from Lindsay started. Her voice was thick with tears, a stark contrast to Austin's cold threats. "Dad, please." She sobbed into my voicemail. Austin said, "You misunderstood everything. We can fix this. Please. Don't do this to us. Don't do this to your family." I listened to the message. Miav tight. The word family felt like a lie in her mouth now. I didn't delete the message. I saved it. Then I put my phone on silent and placed it face down on the counter. The time for talking was over. I picked up the phone one last time and dialed Mr. Davies. He answered on the second ring. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "File the papers." "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice steady. "Let's proceed." A week passed in silence. A heavy, waiting silence. Then, on a sunny Thursday afternoon, a nondescript sedan pulled up to the curb in front of 114 Willow Creek Drive, Ive. A man in a simple suit got out, walked up the stone pathway, and rang the doorbell. Lindsay answered, a bright, friendly smile on her face, likely expecting a package or a neighbor. The man's expression was neutral. "Are you Lindsay Miller?" he asked. She nodded, her smile faltering slightly at his formal tone. "You've been served," he said, handing her a thick manila envelope. Her smile vanished completely. Her eyes dropped to the envelope in her hand. Through the small plastic window on the front, she could see the top page of the legal filing, and the first two words, in bold, capital letters, were the name of the plaintiff, Eric Miller. Her face went pale, a look of pure, unadulterated shock replacing the confusion. The man turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the doorway. The legal papers that would unravel her life held loosely in her trembling hand. Within minutes of the process, server's car pulling away from the curb, my phone began to buzz. It didn't stop. It buzzed and vibrated itself halfway across my kitchen counter. Affrontique. Angry insect, demanding my attention. The first call was from Lindsay. I let it go to voicemail. The second, third, and fourth were also from her. Then came a call from Austin. I ignored that one. 2. Then a text message. The notification flashing across the dark screen. You can't do this! Another one. From Lindsay. This time, Dad, please pick up. I'm begging you. For the next hour. They alternated. Austin's messages were laced with profanity and threats. Calling me a traitor and a vindictive old fool. Lindsay's were a torrent of tearful pleas. Apologies that weren't really apologies. And accusations that I was destroying her life. It was a carefully orchestrated symphony of panic. A classic good cop, bad cop routine. I watched the screen light up again and again. My face, as still and hard as setting concrete. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt nothing at all. It was just noise. When the calls finally subsided, I picked up the phone. The screen showed 27 missed calls and 42 new text messages. I didn't read them. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I held my thumb over the notification bar, swiped it clear, and then powered the phone off completely. The silence that filled my apartment was a relief. Mr. Davies had been clear from this point forward. All communication would go through him. I had built a wall, and I would let the law defend it. The next day, they tried a new tactic. My sister, Carol, called. She lives 2 states away, and we only talk around holidays. Eric, what on earth is going on? She asked. Her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. I just got off the phone with Lindsay. She was hysterical. She said you're trying to kick her and Austin out of their home over some kind of misunderstanding. I took a deep breath. The smell of my morning coffee filling my lungs. Carol, I said, my voice calm and measured. I appreciate your concern, but you are only hearing one side of the story, a very carefully edited side. I'm sure this is a legal matter now, and I can't discuss the details. But Eric, she's your daughter. Family shouldn't be taking each other to court. You're right, I said. Family shouldn't be stealing from each other and lying about it. Either. I have to go. Carol. I hung up before she could reply. I knew Lindsay had been counting on that. On the pressure of family to make me back down. But the man who could be swayed by that pressure was gone. A few days later, Mr. Davies called me. Eric, he said, a note of amusement in his voice. You'll never guess who just tried to call my office directly. Austin. He wanted to negotiate a deal. Man to man. I could almost hear the air quotes. He seemed to think he could charm his way into making this all disappear. I informed him that all communications must go through their legal counsel and that the time for back alley deals was long over. That was Austin's fatal flaw. He thought his charm was a superpower, that he could smile and lie his way out of any problem. He was about to learn that the law doesn't care about a nice smile. Their next move was almost quaint. A week after that, a handwritten letter arrived in my mailbox. It was on Lindsay's favorite floral stationery. I recognized her looping cursive immediately. I opened it and read it, standing right there in my apartment lobby. It was 5 pages of rambling justifications. They were under so much pressure. Austin had made some unwise investments. It was all just a temporary situation that they were about to fix. They were sorry for the misunderstanding and for any hurt feelings. Nowhere in those 5 pages were the words, "We lied," or "We stole from you." I folded the letter, walked back into my apartment, and dropped it into the kitchen trash can without a second thought. The legal process moved at its own deliberate pace. The first step was a court-mandated mediation session. We all met in a sterile conference room at a neutral law firm. I sat on one side of a long, polished table with Mr. Davies. Lindsay and Austin sat on the other side with their young, nervous-looking lover. Lindsay's eyes were red and swollen. Austin just glared at me, his jaw clenched. The mediator, a patient woman in her 60s, laid out the facts. The house would be appraised. All outstanding debts would be paid from the sale, and the remaining equity would be divided. Then she asked if they had a proposal. Their lawyer cleared his throat. "My clients," he said, "are prepared to offer a solution. Mr. Miller can move back into the house. They will consider the past forgiven, and we can all move on from this unfortunate incident." I almost laughed. Mr. Davies just raised an eyebrow. "My client is not interested in being a tenant in a house he co-owns," he said, his voice flat as a frozen lake. "The partition action will proceed as filed." The mediation was over in less than 30 minutes. The court date was set for a month later. It wasn't a dramatic trial like you see on television. It was a simple hearing in a small, quiet courtroom. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with graying hair, reviewed the documents, the deed, the mortgage statements, the evidence of the debt. She looked at Lindsay and Austin. She looked at me. She didn't waste any time. "The law in this state is abundantly clear," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. "A joint tenant has the absolute right to petition for the sale of a property. The defendants have presented no legal basis to contest this right." She looked down at her papers, then back up. "Therefore, the court orders that the property at 114 Willow Creek Drive IV be sold. The proceeds will be used to satisfy all liens and encumbrances, with the remaining equity to be divided between the two legal owners." She banged her gavel once. It was done. A week after the ruling, a truck from a local real estate agency pulled up in front of the house. A man in a polo shirt got out. Carrying a wooden post and a large sign, he walked onto the front lawn. The same lawn I had seated myself years ago, and found a good spot near the sidewalk. He lifted a small sledgehammer. The sound carried all the way down the quiet suburban street. Thump, thump, thump. Each strike was a nail in the coffin of the life they had built on my back. A bright red and white for sale sign now stood proudly on the lawn, a public declaration that the time for consequences had finally arrived. The house sold surprisingly quickly. The market was hot, and the neighborhood was desirable. I stayed away from the entire process. I didn't attend the open houses or read the online listings. To me, it was no longer a home filled with memories. It was an asset to be liquidated. A final, messy piece of business to conclude. The realtor would call Mr. Davies with updates, and Mr. Davies would call me. It was clean, professional, and blessedly free of emotion. On the day of the closing, I met Mr. Davies at the title company's office. I had put on a decent collared shirt, but I still felt out of place among the suits and briefcases. Lindsay and Austin were not there. Their lawyer would sign on their behalf. I was grateful for that small mercy. We sat in a small, windowless room, and a woman slid a stack of papers in front of me that was at least an inch thick. I signed where Mr. Davies told me to sign, my hand steady. After the last signature, the woman gathered the papers and left the room. Mr. Davies leaned back in his chair. "Well, Eric," he said, "it's done." He slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was the final settlement statement. A ledger of debits and credits that told the entire story in cold, hard numbers. I saw the final sale price at the top. Then I saw the deductions, the remaining balance on the original mortgage, the full, staggering amount of the home equity line of credit, the loan against Austin's 401 Kelvin, the realtor's commission, the legal fees for both sides. The numbers were subtracted one by one. A systematic dismantling of the life they had pretended to have. At the very bottom were two lines. One was labeled, "Proceeds to Lindsay and Austin Miller." The other was, "Proceeds to Eric Miller." "Mr." Davies tapped the paper with his pen. "After everything is paid off," he said, his voice quiet, "your share comes to $78,432.17. He paused, then pointed to the line above it. "Their share, after their debts are settled, is a little under $5,000. I stared at the numbers. $78,000. It wasn't a jackpot. It was a refund. It was the sweat from 30 years of 18-hour days. It was the echo of missed holidays and calloused hands. It was the price of my daughter's betrayal, calculated down to the penny. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. It was a Saturday, and I found myself driving through my old neighborhood. I told myself I was just going for a drive, but I knew where I was headed. As I turned onto Willow Creek Drive, I saw it. A big, yellow U-Haul truck was parked in the driveway. Its ramp down like a giant. Sad tongue. Austin was hauling boxes out of the garage. His movements jerky and angry. He threw them into the back of the truck with no care. Lindsay was sitting on the front steps. The same steps I had built, with her head in her hands. Even from a distance, I could see her shoulders shaking. They didn't see me. I slowed my truck, but didn't stop. I just kept driving, watching them in my rearview mirror until they were gone. There was no triumph, no satisfaction. There was just a profound, quiet sadness for the daughter I had lost. I didn't buy another house. I used the money to buy a small, clean condo in a quiet community for people my age. It had a balcony that overlooked a small pond. The day I moved in, I unpacked one box, the one with my coffee maker, and sat on the balcony, watching the ducks glide across the water. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, not sawdust. The only sound was the wind in the trees. And for the first time in a very long time, a feeling of peace settled over me. A great, heavy weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying was finally gone. Months passed. I heard through my sister, Carol, that Lindsay and Austin had moved to another state, a few hours away. They were renting a cramped apartment in a rough part of town. Their credit was destroyed. Austin, stripped of his easy money and fancy house, was apparently not the charming husband he had pretended to be. Their marriage, built on a foundation of lies, was crumbling. I felt a pang of sorrow for Lindsay, but it was the distant sorrow one feels for a stranger. I took some of the money and booked a trip to see the national parks out west, something I had always dreamed of doing. I stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon and felt the sheer scale of the world, and my problems suddenly felt very small. I learned something through all of this. I learned that setting a boundary isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of self-respect. I had spent my whole life building things for my daughter, but I had forgotten to build walls to protect myself. My kindness was not a weakness. And family was not a license for betrayal. I had lost the daughter I thought I had. But I had found myself again. And sitting there on my new balcony, with a warm cup of coffee in my hands and a future that was entirely my own, I knew I had made the right choice.